Yeah, so I hope my screen is visible. So today we'll be basically starting a new topic, which is JavaScript, right? So in the previous 2 weeks, what we've basically looked at, we've basically looked at CSS and HTML, right? And those were basically two what they those two weren't really programming languages, right? Those were like design languages that you consider, but there was no like the concept of programming, like the concept of loops, functions, variables. That concept was not there in CSS and HTML, right? Now, one of the best things about JavaScript is that JavaScript is actually one of the most popular programming languages till now, right? Like in 2022, in 2023, it is like the third most popular programming language, like after Python. And I think 78% of the developers use JavaScript as their primary language. So it just shows that JavaScript is actually like a really powerful language, right? Like you can do a lot with JavaScript. Like you can do so much development with just pure JavaScript. And we basically, we talked about like in the first session, we talked about like the three main components of the web, right? Like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? And we looked at like what, HTML, it was the body, the template of any website. Like if you want to put content, if you want to put buttons, forms, you do that through HTML. And we said that if you want to beautify your websites, if you want to improve the style of the website, you use CSS. And then I said that JavaScript was used for functionality basis, right? Like if you want to like what would happen if I click this button, what would happen if there's a slider, like all of the functionality, right? All of the logic in that website gets implemented through JavaScript. So let me just show you like a real-time use of where JavaScript, like how JavaScript actually gets used in any website, right? So like if you go on the Udemy website, where is JavaScript currently being used? So if you see here, there's a timer, right? There's this particular timer that is being, going down till, there's a 3 hour timer, right? This is being done through JavaScript. There's actually a method, there's a function that is called set timeout or set interval, and you use that method in order to implement timers, right? So this thing is being done through JavaScript. If you hover over this Udemy business, you see there's a pop-up that comes up, right? How does that come up, right? Like when you hover over this, a pop-up comes up. That's done through JavaScript as well, right? Like if I scroll down here, you can see that there's a slider, right? Like this slider is also implemented through JavaScript. When I click, right, when I click this, it slides, right? So that is also done through JavaScript. So this is just some of the examples of where JavaScript actually gets used. This is how, in order to implement the website's functionality, in order to make it, dynamic, because till now we have just been doing HTML, CSS, and it was basically pure static. There was no such form of dynamic, content being loaded in. But now with JavaScript, we're able to do that, right? So I just want to, give the definition of JavaScript, and it's a very simple definition, and it's very important to understand it because it basically describes the features of JavaScript, right? So, and one thing to start off, right? It's very important to understand that JavaScript is nothing like Java, right? So if you have learned Java programming language, right, JavaScript and Java are nothing alike. In fact, actually, JavaScript is way more alike with Python than Java itself. What I would say is JavaScript has a very easy syntax, right? If you've done Python, you know the syntax of Python is pretty easy, right? Similarly with JavaScript, the syntax is quite similar to Python. But it's very important to understand that JavaScript has nothing to do with Java, right? The only reason it has been given the name Java is because JavaScript was formed back in 1995. And in that, in those time periods, the Java programming languages were very popular. That's the only reason why this name was given Java. And the script is basically JavaScript is a scripting language, right? So if we look at the definition, it says that JavaScript is a high level, right? So let's just stop here. It's a high level. What do we mean by high level, right? When we talk about high level, we know that JavaScript is what, a programming language, right? So we know JavaScript is a programming language. Now it's saying that it's a high level programming language, right? It's a let's just ignore this. So let's just ignore this for now. Just read that JavaScript is a high level programming language. Okay. So what does high level mean, right? So high level basically means that you don't have to do, like, you as the user don't have to do some unnecessary tasks like memory management. Like that is being done purely by the JavaScript compiler. So it's a high level language because you're not doing any other extra work in order for the program to successfully compile, right? So that's what is mean by high level, right? Then it says JavaScript is a high level. Then it says object oriented, right? If you have done any like object if you have used any object oriented programming language like C++ or Java, you would know what this means. But object oriented basically means that in JavaScript we are often dealing with objects, right? We're all often dealing with objects, like we're also dealing with classes, right? And this basically, the whole concept of objects is that in objects there's the concept of key value pairs, right? And objects are one of the most important concept in JavaScript. Why they're the most important is because you will be making a lot of you'll be making something called API calls, like application programming interface calls. What this is basically is that you will be fetching data, or let's just say you will be getting data from any other website. Like let's say you want to build a weather application, right? You want to build a weather application that shows the weather forecast, right? Let's say you want to build that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to use data from some other website, and you're going to integrate it within your website, right? So now you're going to be asking the question, right? Where do objects come into play? Because I said that objects are very important. Whenever you make these API calls, and you will, because these are very important. Like when you're doing JavaScript development, there's a specific section dedicated to making these calls, API calls, which are basically getting information from a website, right? You will be getting data in the form of objects, meaning you will be getting data in the form of key value pairs, which is why they say that JavaScript is object oriented, because you're primarily dealing with objects, right? So we understand it's a high level, object oriented, and multi paradigm, right? Multi paradigm simply means that there are different ways of writing the JavaScript. There are different ways of programming JavaScript, right? There are different styles of writing JavaScript. Like there are two ways, they say, right? There's two ways. The first way is imperative. The second one is declarative, right? So you don't need to go in detail what is what, but it just says that there are different styles to basically writing the JavaScript program, right? So this is the basic definition of JavaScript, right? Like no one really asks like what is JavaScript, but it's important to understand because we are going to be learning JavaScript, right? So it's important to understand the definition. So I hope the definition part is clear, right? Now, one thing to understand when you're writing JavaScript code. So we've understood that, what is JavaScript, like multi-paradigm, object-oriented, high level. We have understood all that, right? Now it's important to understand how you're going to be writing your JavaScript code, because like, let me just show you something, right? So I'm going to declare a Python file, right? I'm just going to declare a Python file, and I'm simply going to print, I don't know, 12, right? And in Visual Studio Code, you click here and you can see that there's an output 12, right? It's pretty simple. And you can do that, with any programming language. If I had, in C, you do what? Printf, right? In Java, you do system.out.println, right? And you know that in the terminal, the output comes up, right? That's that's basic for any programming language, right? In C, C++, Python, Java, all those, right? But in JavaScript, it's a little different, right? You will never use the terminal, right? There's no such thing as using the terminal with JavaScript, because in JavaScript you're primarily going to be working with the browser, right? So how in in any programming language other than JavaScript, like if let's say C, right? C++, you work with what? You work with the system in order to print the output, right? Like even in the Java, if you have to print something, you use the system class, right? The system class. So in any programming language, if you want to print something on the terminal, you have to work with the system, right? With your system. But in JavaScript, what you're going to be working with the browser, right? You're going to be working with the browser, and your output is going to, remember I said something about the developer tools. Like if you have your web page, like you're building your website, and you left click, and I said if you click inspect, this is what's called the developer tools. And I said that developer tools are the most important thing, right? They're the most important thing when you're doing JavaScript development. and I'll show you how it's the most important thing. So right now, what we have is right now we have a basic HTML file, right? And this is needed because I said that JavaScript needs the browser to work, right? To see the output and all, right? So right now we have a simple HTML file. There's nothing to it, right? And I've basically given it a title, simple, and I've given some inline CSS. That's all I've done, right? Now, what I want to do is I want to basically declare a JavaScript file, right? So how do we do that, right? So if I go here, I left click and I say new file, right? And I simply give it the name script.js. .js is what the extension of JavaScript file, right? So this is my new JavaScript file, right? So again, all I did, left click, new file, the name of the file .js, right? Now, as I said, in Python, in C, C++, we do print, printf, right? So you'll be asking the question, right? How do we print in JavaScript? Like what is the first program that anybody writes in any new programming language? You write what? Print hello world, right? That's like the first thing anybody does when you pick up a new programming language. So let's learn, right? Let's learn how we do that in JavaScript, because I already said that we're not going to be working with the terminal because we can't, because JavaScript is a front end language. We're working with the browser only. Okay. So how do we write hello world in JavaScript? Well, there's a method, right? There's a method called, so let's just say console.log, right? And this is a method. And if I say hello world, right? Hello world. Now, console.log is the equivalent to printf, system.out.println in other programming languages. It's basically saying that print hello world to the terminal, but we know that the terminal, we're not using the terminal. But what we're doing is we're printing hello world to the console, right? To the console. Now, where is the console and what is the console? So if I go back here, you can see here there's something in the developer tools called the console, right? You can see that, right? Now if I go here, this is where all of your output is going to show up. So this hello world, that we typed in should be showing here, right? It should be, it will show just in a few seconds. It will show up, right? This, whenever you use, like if I say console.log 12, anything within console.log, it will show here, right? Anything, right? Now you will be asking the question, right? Why isn't it showing? Now I'm going to go back to my HTML file. And if you remember when we talked about CSS and I talked about external CSS. And in external CSS, I said that whenever you declare a new CSS file like style.css, I said that you basically have to link it, right? You have to link your CSS file, right? So how did we do that, right? We did, sorry, in Yeah, so let me just show you how to actually do that, how to link your JavaScript file first. So if you remember, what we do is basically type in script, right? Like script, and you want to basically type :src, right? Script :src. Now, if you remember, this source tag is basically used to specify the location of the JavaScript file, right? That's basically what it's used to do. So my JavaScript file, because it's in the same directory, what I'm going to do is script.js. Right. So what this line of code is doing, it's linking our JavaScript file, which is external, remember, to our HTML file. Right. So again, I'm going to delete it. I'm going to show it again, script, right, :src, right. In the source, you want to specify the location of your script file, right. So that's going to be script.js because remember, it's in the same directory, right. So now it's linked, right. So if I go back, you can see in the console, the hello world and the 12 is now coming out as output, right? Remember what we typed here? Hello world, 12, and 12. So as I said, the console.log is used to basically show the output, right? Just it's similar to your printfs, print system.out.println, all that, right? So that's how you basically do printing in JavaScript, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how do you take input, right? So that's just like we can print output, right? You can take input, right? So how do we take input in JavaScript? Because remember, we are not using the terminal. So how do we, take input? So in JavaScript, there's a method. Again, we're often working with methods, right? So you can use this method called prompt, right? This method called prompt, and you can say like, okay, enter your name, right? This is, I'll show you what it does. This method and whatever you want to type in within this, like you want to ask a question, enter your age, enter your name, whatever, right? And I'm going to go back to the browser and see what happens. You can see a pop-up comes up, right? And there's a literal, like, input box where you can, enter the input that you wish to do, right? So my name is Ayush, and I'll click OK, right? Now, what we did is we basically, we entered some value, but we never saved that value, right? Like I just entered it and that's it. You can see nothing happened with that value. I didn't use it. I didn't print it. Nothing. I didn't do anything, right? So this is where we, introduce the concept of variables, right? So I'm going to basically declare a variable, and I don't want you to focus on how I declared the variable right now, because I'm going to talk about it in just a few seconds. So I'm just going to declare a variable, right? So let input is equal to prompt, and I'm basically going to print whatever I've written in my input to the console, right? So let's go back. So my name is Aayush, and you can see on the console we printed whatever I typed in into the prompt, right? So I hope that is clear. I basically took prompt is basically a function that is used to take input. I saved it in a variable. How I declare that variable, not important. I'm going to talk about it in a few seconds. And I printed the whatever I typed in as input to the console, right? So I hope that is clear. If you have any questions regarding how that happened, you can ask. Yeah. So this is how you basically take input in JavaScript, right? Now, let's talk about, how you can see that we declare a variable, and let's talk about how we declare variables, right? So declaring variables, right? How we declare variables. Now, it's very important to understand. I don't know if okay, in C and C++, all those programming languages, how do you declare variables? You usually do int a is equal to 5, float, I don't know, f is equal to 5.2, all those. Like in C++, in C and Java, this is how you do it, right? And in Python, what you do, you basically take a variable name and you just, put the value, right? You simply just put the value in Python, that is. Now, how do we do it in JavaScript? Now, it's very important to understand that in JavaScript, JavaScript is basically a dynamically typed language. It is a dynamically typed language. Now, what that basically means is I don't have to declare the data type when I'm declaring variables. You know how in Python you don't have to do that as well. If you haven't done Python, that's okay. I'll basically explain what this is. But if you have done Python, you know that you don't have to declare the data type ever. Similarly, in JavaScript, you don't have to declare the data type. Meaning, if I have a variable called a, right, I don't have to specify whether it's an int. I don't have to specify whether it's a float. I don't have to specify whether it's a string. Nothing like that. Okay, all I have to type is a, like the variable name. Okay, ignore this. I'll talk about it in just a few seconds. The variable name, and type anything you want, whatever value comes, right? 12.2, that's valid, right? 12, an integer, that's valid, right? A string, right? That's valid as well. So it's a dynamically typed language. That's very important to understand, because that's one of the features of JavaScript, that you don't have to explicitly declare the particular the data type, right, in JavaScript, right? So that is basically what the concept of dynamically typed language is, right? Now, so that's one concept. Now, we also, so you're probably wondering like what this is, right? Like let, right? What let is, what it's doing here. Like you said, this is a dynamically typed language, so why is this here? So I'll explain what this is. In JavaScript, we basically have the concept of three things, right? These three things: let, const, and var, right? So what are these, right? Basically, whenever you want to declare any variable, you always have to use one of these three keywords before that variable, before the variable name. Meaning, Either I will use let, or I will use const, or I will use var. Then I will type the variable name equals to initialize to whatever value you wish to, right? So this is the basic syntax of variable declaration in JavaScript, that is, right? So one of these keywords need to be there. They have to be there, otherwise you will run into an error, right? Then the variable name, whichever you wish, I'm pretty sure you know how to, the rules of variable name, and then the value, right? So let's see the difference between let, const, and var, right? So we already looked at like let me just delay, let b is equal to 12, right? So what does let say, right? What let basically says that this particular value, this particular, sorry, variable, right? This particular variable can be mutated, right? It can be changed, meaning if I wish to change its value to, I don't know, 54, right? And I print it. So I'm going to print b, and I'm going to go back here. You can see I print 54, right? Pretty simple. I'm just gonna disable this. You can see I print 54. Here I print 54, right? Now, let basically means if you want to change any variable's value, you can. Simple as that, right? We have another concept called const, and as you can guess, it basically means that you want to keep that variable in, you basically don't want to change the value of that particular variable. Means like let's say I declare the variable pi, right? And let's say 3.14, right? That's something I want to declare in my program, and I want to make sure that this particular value never gets changed, right? So if what happens if I try to change it, right? Like let's say I say I want to change it to 3.1456, something like that. So let's go back, and you can see the JavaScript gives a straight error. You can see invalid assignment to const pi. So you cannot change any value which is a const, right? Any variable which is a const, you cannot change its value, right? Whether you want to use let or whether you want to use const, totally depends on the type of variable, remember, because the value of pi is never going to change. So it's good practice to use const with it, right? And if you're using a usual variable, you're going to be using let because you want that variable's value, you may want it to change, right? So does anybody have any questions regarding this? You can ask. Yeah. So the final thing we have, so we have let and const, right? So I think you've understood the difference between let and const. Let basically means you can change the value of the particular variable, and const means you cannot change, right? And the last thing is basically var, and the var is pretty interesting one because this is never used actually. Like if I declare x is equal to 15, this is never used, and the reason why this is never used is because this is basically belonging to an old version. This is actually belonging to like a version before, like the newest version that came out of JavaScript was ES6, I think, back in 2015, right? And this particular, var, this keyword was used before ES6, like before 2015. So this is never used. But it's important to know that why this is there, because you'll see a lot of code, online using var, right? And var is nothing new. There's nothing new because var and let are the same thing. They're the exact same thing. You basically, if you want to change the value of x, you can do that. There's no difference. But the problem is there's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of confusion regarding using the keyword var, right? There's the whole concept of, there's this concept of TDZ in the var, and this basically stands for temporal dead zone. A huge, like a very in-depth topic in JavaScript. Not important. All you have to know is that there's a lot of problems when you use var, and you should avoid using it because right now we are in a way updated version of JavaScript. We're not in 2015, so avoid using JavaScript. But if you do encounter var, just remember that it's similar to the let keyword. There's nothing new to it, right? So that's the whole concept regarding how you basically declare variables in JavaScript, right? So we looked at let, const, and var, right? These are the, I don't know, like the specifiers of your variable, you can say, right? If you want to specify whether you want to change it or no, right? Now let's talk about data types, right, in JavaScript. I did say, remember, I said that it's a dynamic type language. We don't have to explicitly declare that our variable is a particular data type, right? But JavaScript still has data types, right? It does, like, this is a data type. This is a data type of one data type that we will talk about, right? So let's talk about the data types. The first data type is number, right? That is the first data type. The second data type is string, right? Third is Boolean. Four is, this is actually a weird data type, just undefined. Another data type is actually null. So these two are a bit weird ones because you'll never actually see these two. That's like saying in C++, like, I don't know, an error is a data type. But you can see like undefined and null are actually data types in JavaScript, right? So let's go through one by one. And how we'll go through is basically we're going to ask JavaScript what data type it is. I'm not going to answer what data type it is. JavaScript itself is going to tell me what data type it is. So we're going to ask JavaScript the different data types, right? So I'm going to say console.log because remember, I want to basically print something to the console, right? And I'm basically going to use this particular keyword, right? Type of. This is a keyword, and this what this keyword does is basically you can find out the data type of any particular value, variable, anything, right? So if I type in 12, right, what this is going to do is it's going to tell me the data type of 12, right? It's going to tell me the data type of 12. So what do you think the data type should be? So we know that it's not going to be undefined or null, right? Because it's not that. And you can clearly see it's not going to be string or Boolean. So we know it's a number, right? So if I go back here, sorry, I go back here, you can see, the data type is what? You can see the highlighted part, number, right? JavaScript itself is telling me that this thing is a number, right? Like I said, there was no concept of int, there's no concept of float, right? So if I make this 12.56, it will still be a number. You can see it's still a number. If I refresh, you can see still a number, right? Because there's no concept of, floats, all that in JavaScript. It's basically a number or it's not a number. Simple as that, right? So this was basically what a number, right? Number. Let's look at the next thing. Like, next data type is what? A string. String is basically, you can enclose it within double quotes, like hello world, right? This is a string, right? This is how you declare a string, right? So if I go back here, I am expecting what? String. You can see the data type of hello world is a string, right? This is one way of declaring strings in JavaScript. Another way you can actually do is by single quotes as well, right? This is the same thing, I think. You can see string again, right? Single quotes, double quotes, it doesn't matter, right? So this is basically what a string, right? Next one, pretty simple, Boolean, right? Boolean is what? True or false, right? If I say true, you can see Boolean, right? Type of true, what is it? Boolean, right? False, remember, Boolean takes two values, true or false, right? That's it. This is what? Boolean. The next one is, as I said, this is a weird one, right? Undefined. It's very, like it's not normal, right? So type of undefined is, you can see the type of undefined is undefined, right? Now you will be wondering like why this is a data type, right? Why is undefined a data type? That's so like, that doesn't make any sense. Why will I ever use this? Well, the funny thing is you will never use this, but JavaScript will sometimes make you forced to use this. Meaning, sometimes in JavaScript you're writing code, right? You're writing whatever code you're writing. What will Sometimes what will happen is it won't give you an error. Like let's say in your JavaScript you have written a program and your program is not working as it's supposed to, right? But it's not giving you an error, remember. So you've written a program, it's not giving you an error, but however, it's not working as you thought it would, right? Like let's say you want to multiply two numbers, but for some reason in your program it's not just multiplying. For example, maybe it's like giving the power of some number, but it's not multiplying, right? In those cases, sometimes what happens is that some of your variables may be undefined, right? And because they're undefined, you will never know, like in your JavaScript, because in an error it will show straight up there's an error. In the console, it will straight show up. Undefined will never show up on your console. You have to debug, you have to explicitly debug the fact that one of your variables is undefined. There's no error because JavaScript is not giving you a compiler error, it's not giving you a runtime error. It's simply saying that there's something in your JavaScript code that's undefined. And you, as the programmer, have to somehow, determine which part of it is undefined, right? So this is where it kind of gets tricky, right? This is where it starts to get confusing because it's not giving an error, but it's giving you undefined. And the moment it's undefined, you have to go through the entire code by yourself, right? So this is a point to keep, right, when writing JavaScript. The last one is null, right? So type of null. Now, I think this is there's basically like there's some problem with this. Like if I go back, it's basically going to show the type of null is object. I'm not sure. Yeah, you can see it shows object, right? As I guessed. And there's again a lot of ambiguity regarding why that is because I'm still not sure why it's an object. I actually don't know why it's an object, but I know that I've done this before and I've seen that the type of null is an object, but they say that null is itself a data type, so it doesn't really it doesn't make sense. They're saying that null is a data type, but when you do type of null, it's an object. So it's pretty it's a pretty whole, I think it's a very in deep concept that you have to understand. But for now, you're not going to be using null, right? You're not going to be using the main things are number, string, boolean, right? These are the main data types that you will be working with, right? So yeah, so if you have any questions regarding what the data types were, what value you can put in those data types, you can ask, right? Yeah, so that's the whole concept of data types. So next thing we'll basically talk about is we'll talk about some type conversion, right? Because that's kind of important. Like if you want to convert any data type to another data type, and this is really important, right? Because this seems like a basic topic. It's not there are some concepts in which you have to use type conversion. And the reason I say it's important is because what you're going to be doing, when you're building your websites, and because what you're going to be working with is you're primarily going to be working with your HTML files, right? Along with JavaScript files, what you're going to do is you're going to be connecting your JavaScript file with your HTML file. And what you're going to be doing is you will be retrieving this element in JavaScript, right? You'll retrieve this element and whatever value is here, like let's say there's some value here. I want to convert it to a number, right? Like let's say here I had a value like 55, right? Like I had the value 55 here and I wanted to get that into JavaScript, right? But because the value I get will be a string, I need to convert it to a number, right? So how do we do that? So in order to basically convert, right? So convert, I think, what string to number is basically a method. So let's say console.log, right? So 55, right? Let's say 55, we want to convert that to a number, right? So there's literally a method actually called number, right? Number 55. So if I go back, you can see. So let me just show you the difference. Let me show you the difference between 55 and this 55. Just look at the color. Just watch the color, right? You can see this is black, this is green. Right, and this is actually a really good thing that the console does is that, sorry, developer tools does is that it highlights that if it's green, it's a number, right? Green number, green number. If it's black, you can see that it's a string, right? So remember, this is a string and this is a number, right? Now you can't do this, right? I'm not sure you can do this. You can see that it basically shows not a number, right? It doesn't give you an error, but it shows you not a number, right? Because you cannot convert this into a number. There's no such thing of a number equivalent to hello world, right? That's just not possible, right? So this is another, remember I was talking about undefined being a concept. Here you can see there's no error. There's no way it's giving you an error, right? But it's only showing you not a number, right? And this is a downside to JavaScript, that it won't show you error most of the times. It will simply give you not a number, undefined, and with that you have to debug, oh, where it's gone wrong, all that. right? So this is how you can convert a string to a number, right? If you want to, like if you want to do something like this, something like, const a is equal to 12 minus 5, right? Let me just change this, xy, right? 12, you can subtract, like I'm basically what I'm doing is I'm subtracting string values, right? Now this is another important concept in JavaScript, because if I do something like this, let me show you the opposite to this, right? Let me show you the opposite to this. XYZ is equal to 12 plus 5, right? 12 plus 5. So I'm going to print XYZ first, right? So this, what this is basically doing, this is basically going to, if I go back, this should concatenate it, right? If I go back, you can see this is concatenating it. Remember, this is still a string. So don't think of this as 125. This is not a number. Look, I'm talking about this one, right? This one, concatenation, right? This particular part. If I basically use the plus operator with two strings, I'm concatenating it, right? I don't care. This is a number. You basically trying to put it as a number, right? But if I use the plus operator, this is a type of string, right? I'll show you type of. Now watch, you can see this is a string, right? Type of this is a string, right? Now, what I wanted to show you, the opposite to this, right? Now, watch what happens when I print xy, right? Watch what happens. So remember, I printed xyz. So let me just show you. Xyz was doing what? Concatenation. 12 plus 5 is equal to 125, right? 125. 3 digits concatenated together, right? Actually, 2 digits plus 1 digit concatenated, right? That's what we did. Now, let me show you what the output of xy is, right? Xy. You can see that it prints 7. Well, that's weird, is because when we use the plus operator, it was concatenating. But when we're doing the minus, it's actually subtracting the values, right? This is another concept in JavaScript, is that when you use the minus operator with two strings that containing values, this will automatically, this will automatically convert string values to number. This will automatically do it by itself. So what this is doing is, in behind the scenes, is basically saying that that 12 convert it to the number 12, and that 5 convert it to the number 5, and then just subtract, right? So this is another important concept, because you need to understand, when you're doing plus, you're doing concatenation, but when you're doing minus, you're actually subtracting the values, right? The string values, right? So this is basically a simple concept, important one, simple concept in JavaScript regarding operators. Like if you want to subtract string values, you actually get the number value itself, right? So this was the basic concept of type conversion. Yeah, so this was the basic concept of type conversion. We also have another important concept called equality operator, right? Equality operator. And the equality operator, the reason I want to talk about is because there's two equality operators. If you don't know what the equality operator is, let me show you what it is, right? So it's like, yeah. So this is what you call an equality operator, right? The reason I'm not going over other operators like plus, minus, or like multiplication, division, these are all, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what they are. Like there's nothing new in JavaScript. Like all of these operators are the same, right? In all the programming languages, most of the operators are the same, right? And or these are all the same, right? These are something like very easy to understand, but there's something called the equality operator, and this is also a part of other programming languages. But there's one other equality operator that gets used in JavaScript, and it's very important to understand the difference between the different equality operators, right? So the other operators, they're very easy to understand. If you don't understand, I can basically provide a cheat sheet, which I will, don't worry. But I just want to make sure you guys understand the use of equality operator, right? So if you don't know what the equality operator is basically the equality operator checks whether the right hand side, so this right hand side is equal to the left hand side, right? So it checks whether they're equal, right? So if it's checking whether they're equal, it's going to return what? A Boolean value, right? It's like saying, this is basically asking the question whether 12 is equal to 12. Well, the answer to that is yes, true. That is true, right? You can see true. 12 is equal to 12. If I say is 12 equal to 15, right? That's false. Pretty simple, right? Now, let's do something like this, right? This is another concept of, strings and numbers, right? So let's say 12 is equal to 12, right? But this is a string, remember? I've enclosed this within a string, right? What should be printed? Like, should it print true or should it print false, right? So if I go back here, you can see it prints true, right? I basically remember this is a string. So what I'm saying is whether this string 12 is equal to the number 12, right? And what JavaScript is saying is it's saying that yes, that's true, because this equality operator, what it's saying is that it's basically converting this string to a number. That's what it's doing. Behind the scenes, it's automatically converted this to a number, and it's saying that 12 is equal to 12, right? So this returns true. Yeah, that is true, right? However, now this is where a little confusion comes up, because there's another equality operator. So this is one type of equality operator. There's another equality operator, which is basically one more, right? This was two equals, this was three equals. Now let me show you the difference between these two. You can see, now let me just show you the difference. So same code as above, right? 12 is equal to 12, 12 is equal to 12, right? Now, just like this returned true, right? If I go back, what should it return? You can see that it returns false, right? This returns false, so this returns false, right? And this returns true, right? What this is doing is this is saying that this is basically working in something called strict mode, right? This is saying that I don't care whether this is a number or not. You're staying as a string, right? I don't care. This is going to stay as a string, and I'm going to compare the number against the string. And you know that the number, this particular data type, is not even equivalent to this data type. This is a string, this is a number, right? They will never be equal. So this is what this equality operator is doing, right? Because a lot of times, you will accidentally use the double equality operator, and you'll say that, oh, why is it returning true when it should be returning false, right? Similarly with this case. So remember, this is like called the strict mode, like when you're basically using the equality operator, but you're working in strict mode, right? Here it's saying that I don't want you to convert this into a number, right? I want you to stay as a string and now compare against this particular number, and of course it's going to return false. Right. So this is the basic concept regarding the equality operator. Right. So it's important to understand when to use what. Right. You know, the question is like, which one should you use? And, because you can use either one of them, but it's good practice to use this one. It's good practice to use this one. But sometimes the problem is you want your code to work in a certain way, right? You basically want your code to, like, because you're getting data from your HTML, you don't want to convert it into a number, and you want to check whether this particular, like, let's say you want to get 55, and you want to check whether 55 is equal to some value in your JavaScript. But if you use this operator, you have to convert that particular number into a number, that particular value that we got here, 55. This is a string. I have to convert it to a number, then I have to compare. But I can just simply have done this, right? Because this will automatically do that for me behind the scenes. So that's fine, right? So yeah, this was the basic concept of the equality operator, and we'll basically wind up today with the last concept of loops, right? Loops, pretty simple. You have done any programming language, there's a for loop, while, and do while loop as well, right? So I'm just going to go over the basic syntax of the for loops and the while loops. So if you want to declare any for loop, it's the same syntax as C, C++, Java, right? Not the same as Python, right? So if you want to declare any for loop, you simply type let I is equal to 5, right? I less than whatever, highest you want to go, and I plus plus, right? And you can do whatever you want. I want to print, you know, value I, like like 5 times, right? So that's how the concept of loop works, right? So does anybody have a question? integers or in, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah. So if you want to basically
Folks,
yeah.
yeah. So do you guys are comfortable with the session, or we should wind up it now? If comfortable, please raise your hands. Cool. Cool. All right. So 8 plus 2, 10. यार बाकी लोग wind up. अच्छा. Okay, guys, down your hand, please. How many of you want to wind up the session now? Please raise your hands. Exam, I know Pankaj. That's why we are trying to wind up it on Friday and Saturday so that you can get the complete time on Sunday to. Ayush, how much time do you need?
Just 2 3 minutes. I'll just cover up loops. That's it.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
So I'll just quickly wind up like you can simply use the concept of loops. Like here, you can see I just basically printed 5 6 7 8 9, right? Simple concept of loops. If you've done any programming language, you can basic syntax, right? Similarly, if you do while loop, right? Like if I declare a variable like let I is equal to 5, right? I less than 10, and here you basically type the body, right? Like print I, and then I plus plus. I'm pretty sure you know what I plus plus, right? I is equal to I plus plus post increment, right? So if I go back here, it is I is equal to, yeah. So when this actually happens, this basically means that your JavaScript, your web page basically crashed, right? And I have to reopen it. You can see here. You can see here the value of I, because what I have to do is I is equal to 5. I'm not sure, 0. Yeah, so this is the while loop, what we're printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? This is what the while loop is printing, and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's what the for loop is printing, right? So this is the basic concept of loops in JavaScript: while loop, for loops, right? And yeah, this was all about today's session, right? We took the data types, let, constant, var, and we also looked at how we can connect our JavaScript file to our HTML, right? So yeah, this is all about today's session, right? So if you have any questions regarding today's session, you can ask.
हेलो आयुष हो गया क्या
Yeah, oh,
okay so guys any doubt from today's session regarding javascript no कितने लोग फर्स्ट ईयर से हैं यहाँ पे तो सेशन ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं ओके ओके बहुत सारे हैं okay guys thank you for joining um, all the best for your first year exams as well you can leave now if you have any doubt then you can ask